Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Luffy ate air and gargoyle fruit? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the gold Mamba for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. It was nighttime in the jungle. Rain clouds had appeared in the dark sky and sent a light shower into the dense canopy of trees. The surrounding area was only lit by splashes of moonlight that managed to find holes through the abundant foliage. The darkness caused by the amount of trees was no problem for the animal life found in the jungle, species that have adapted to the darkness with heightened sense of smell, keen hearing and superior eyesight. In short, the jungle was no place for a young boy, which is exactly where Monkey D. Luffy had woken to find himself. Stretching his arms and letting out a yawn, Luffy stood up and rubbed his eyes sleepily, looking around. Wearing his favorite shirt, the one with the anchor on it, and a pair of blue shorts, he turned and came face to face with a spider monkey that had ventured to the forest floor and now hung upside down, looking curiously at this animal it had never seen before. Upon seeing the spider monkey, Luffy blinked furiously and rubbed his eyes again. Opening them slowly, he came face to face with the spider monkey again. A few seconds passed before Luffy's eyes widened and he let out a scream, causing the spider monkey to screech in fear. Swiping a paw at this unknown scary animal and just missing, it retreated higher into the trees. Stopping once it felt it was a safe distance from the screaming animal, the spider monkey continued to observe with curiosity. Luffy, continuing to scream, took off running through the forest. After a short distance, he tripped over a root that was sticking out of the ground and was sent sprawling into a nearby tree. "Ow, ow, ow," Luffy said aloud. "Who's there?" said a voice from behind Luffy. Luffy, surprised, turned in the direction of the voice. Seeing a tree where he thought the voice had come from, he knocked on the tree saying, "Did you just talk to me?" "I said who's there?" came the voice again. Now Luffy was extremely curious. Knocking on the tree once again, but this time getting no response, he turned away from it, scratching his head. "What kind of place did Grandpa Garp send me this time? Crazy screeching monkeys and talking trees," Luffy said out loud. "What are you talking about?" said the tree again, except this time a boy was standing next to the tree and clearly the owner of the voice. "Ah," yelped Luffy in surprise upon noticing the boy. "Who are you?" "Well, not a tree for one, but my name is Fitz," answered the boy. He was about the same height as Luffy, wearing a short-sleeve red button-up shirt and a pair of black pants. He had dirty blonde hair and an air of intelligence that far exceeded his age. "And who might you be?" Fitz asked as he adjusted his glasses. "My name's Luffy," Luffy said with a big grin on his face. "What are you doing out in the jungle?" asked Luffy. "That's what I should be asking you," said Fitz, amused by this boy. Luffy tilted his head to one side, apparently confused by what Fitz was saying. "I live in a village just over there," said Fitz, pointing in the direction of a clearing, and sure enough, a village. Luffy followed Fitz's finger, and when he saw the village his eyes widened and his mouth opened, his chin almost hitting the floor. "What? How did I not see that?" Luffy asked in complete confusion. Seeing the village, Luffy began to think of everything that came with a village. Houses. Meat. Village people. Meat. Beginning to drool, he turned to Fitz saying, "I'm starving. Is there any meat in your village?" "Haha," laughed Fitz. "Of course there is meat," he said as he started walking in the direction of his village. "Why don't you come to my house and have a bite to eat?" Of course Luffy was all for the idea of eating something, so he followed close behind Fitz. "You should probably stay the night too. You'll probably get eaten if you sleep out here," said Fitz nonchalantly, pretending not to notice Luffy looking all around for potential predators. Flash forward. After eating their fill, Luffy and Fitz went exploring on the outskirts of the village. "You know, Luffy, the villagers here are always talking about the legend of this jungle," Fitz said. "It said that there are fruits in this jungle that grant the eater a certain power. Nobody knows for certain where the fruit is or what the power is, but they whisper about it giving the person who consumes it the ability to control and become air. What do you think?" "Sujay," yelled Luffy with stars in his eyes, "we should go look for it." "We can try," said Fitz, "but I doubt we will find anything." So Fitz and Luffy made their way through the forest. They had been walking for about an hour when they stopped to rest near a river. Sitting on the massive roots of one of the trees, Luffy noticed something strange. A tail seemingly belonging to no one was swishing back and forth by the root Luffy and Fitz were sitting on. Thinking back to the spider monkey that had scared him, and then apparently not thinking at all, Luffy stomped on the tail, and in response came a deafening roar. Luffy turned to Fitz and screamed, "Broon!" So they took off through the forest, somehow keeping ahead of whatever ferocious cat Luffy had pissed off. They stuck close to the river. Ducking and bobbing and weaving through the trees and various obstacles of the forest, they managed to stay ahead of the deadly feline until they came to a cliff where the river turned into a waterfall. They could hear the roaring of water hitting water as the waterfall slammed into the lake below. Fitz was the first to arrive at the cliff, stopping just short of falling, but he didn't have much time to think as Luffy was right behind him. He was looking back, trying to find the thing they were running from when he ran right into Fitz, sending them both careening over the edge of the cliff and splashing into the lake. Pulling themselves to shore and breathing heavily, Luffy noticed a pathway that went behind the waterfall. Following the pathway, Luffy and Fitz came to find a cave just inside the waterfall. There were holes in the roof of the cave, allowing moonlight to illuminate the room. In the center of the cave there was a tree with one fruit on it. "Ah!" Fitz exclaimed, "this must be it. The legendary air fruit." The fruit hanging loosely from the tree was pear-shaped and a dark green color with white swirls on it. "Luffy, I'm going to eat it. I've always wondered what it would be like to fly." "That's okay," Luffy said, "I'll just eat this fruit I found on the ground over here. I mean, it looks okay and I'm hungry." Held in Luffy's hand was a cream-colored apple-shaped fruit with white swirls on it. Fitz, not bothering to look over at Luffy, had plucked the pear-shaped fruit off the tree and eaten the whole thing in one bite. Luffy, watching Fitz, shrugged his shoulders and did the same. "Ack, cough cough. That is one foul-tasting fruit," protested Fitz. "Ard cough. Mine tasted awful too," said Luffy. "But somehow I feel really light." Fitz turned to look at Luffy and his eyes almost popped out of his head. "Luffy, that might be because you're floating," yelled Fitz, "and what happened to your feet?" Luffy looked down to see that his feet were no longer there. "Ahhhh. What happened to my feet and why am I floating? Ahhh. Make it stop," screamed a panicked Luffy. No sooner had he thought the words and his feet reappeared as he fell back to the ground. Stated Luffy, "that was weird." Fitz, looking troubled, pulled out a devil fruit guidebook and flipped through it hurriedly. "Luffy, what color was the fruit you just ate?" he asked. "I don't know. I think it was creamy colored and had these white swirls on it, but it tasted terrible." Fitz's face went pale. "You ate the air fruit," he stated plainly. "Well, I guess that does explain why I was floating just a second ago," Luffy said. Fitz went through the whole encyclopedia back to front. "I can't find the one I ate anywhere in here," said a panicked Fitz. "Maybe it hasn't been discovered yet," offered Luffy. And with that, the Luffy and Fitz left and tried to find their way back to the village. Flash forward. Luffy and Fitz arrived back at the village to find Garp waiting. "You ready to go, Luffy?" asked Garp with a grin on his face. "Yay, Grandpa, but can we take Fitz with us?" asked Luffy hopefully. "He's my friend." "Well, it's up to Fitz's parents," replied Garp. "Actually, my parents aren't here. I'm staying with friends of my parents. They went off into the world searching for something a couple months ago and haven't come back since, but I would really like to come with you guys." "Well, how about that? I don't see any reason why you can't," stated Garp, grinning even wider. "Sujay. Now we can both become pirates together with," yelled Luffy, only to get a smack on the back of his head from Garp. "What did I tell you about that pirate talk? You will be a marine and nothing else," said Garp, a frown on his face now. Fitz smiled, thinking to himself, "This could be fun." It was a beautiful sunny day in Windmill Village. Shanks and his crew had just set sail, and Luffy and Fitz were at the dock, waving goodbye. Turning towards the town, they started walking back to the bar to get out of the hot sun. Entering the bar through the swinging saloon doors and seeing Makino finishing cleaning the mess left behind by the pirates, Luffy and Fitz took their usual seats at the bar. Fitz took out a book from his back pants pocket and, adjusting his glasses, he began to read. Luffy rested his head against the bar, not in a good mood at the moment. "Erg," protested Luffy. "He didn't take us with him again." "It does seem that way," said Fitz, sarcastically. "I want to be a pirate too," pouted Luffy. As the conversation went back and forth and finally Fitz, trying to ignore Luffy, concentrated on his book, having read the same line 7 times. Neither of them noticed the tall man with the green cloak come in and sit at the bar. Taking down his hood, Makino noticed he had a tattoo on the right side of his face as she came over to get his order. "What will it be?" she asked the strange man. "I'll have a bottle of sake," the man said in a gruff voice. "Oh, and do you happen to know where I can find Monkey D. Luffy?" Luffy, now noticing the man, at the mention of his name, called over to the mystery man. "I'm Luffy. Who are you?" Luffy asked. Looking over at the boy, the man stood and walked over to the table Luffy and Fitz were sitting at. "Well, Luffy, I'm your father," stated the man, quite casually given the situation. "My name is Monkey D. Dragon." "Suge," Luffy yelled with stars in his eyes. "Hey Fitz, look, I have a father." Dragon laughed at this reaction as he sat down at the bar. After talking with Luffy and Fitz for a while and a bottle of sake later, Dragon began telling them his real purpose for reuniting with his son. "Luffy, I'm the leader of the Revolutionary Army," he said, in a hushed voice, so only the three of them could hear. "I've been watching you for a while, and it seems you've eaten one of the devil fruits." "Yeah, it's the air one," Luffy said proudly, "check it out." Luffy, standing on the table and getting into a position as if he was going to punch the dragon, extended his arm and shouted, "Air blast." As he extended his arm, a current of air was released from his fist and hit Dragon in the chest, sending him flying across the bar. Laughing loudly as he got himself up and dusted himself off, he walked back to the table telling Makino that he would pay for the damages. "That's quite a punch you've got there," Dragon said, as he sat back down. "It seems that you have a devil fruit power as well. Would you mind showing me?" Dragon asked Fitz. Fitz put down his book and set his glasses on the table. Taking off his shirt and stepping back from the table, he began to transform. Black leathery wings sprouted from his shoulder blades as a thick black fur covered his body. His muscles bulged as he underwent the transformation, and razor-sharp claws sprouted from his fingers and toes. His head kept relatively the same structure, except that his mouth and nose jutted outward from his face a little more to make room for the long fangs that had now taken the place of his teeth. His hair turned from a dirty blonde to a flowing black mane, and he grew a long tail complete with a sharp blade at the end of it. On the tips of his wings and what would be the shoulders of his wings, a sharp blade-like bone stuck out looking menacing. My. That is quite a powerful zone fruit you've eaten, Fitz, Dragon said in admiration of the deadly-looking creature he had become. "What am I?" asked Fitz timidly. "You ate an extremely rare mythical zone devil fruit called the Jigwaru no Mi, Gargoyle devil fruit. It's a fruit I have only heard of through rumor," Dragon said. Fitz looked relieved to have finally figured out what manner of beast he transformed into. "One with the Kuki no Mi, air devil fruit, and one with the Jigwaru no Mi," Dragon said, chuckling to himself. "And what do you two plan to do with such powers?" he asked. "I'm gonna be the Pirate King," shouted Luffy. "Ho, lofty goal. What about you, Fitz?" Dragon asked. "I want to travel the world like my parents are doing, and maybe I'll be able to find them someday, so I've decided to join Luffy on his journey," said Fitz proudly. "Well then, how about I train the two of you so that you will be powerful enough to achieve your goals?" asked Dragon with a smile. "And maybe the two of you can help me at points along your journey." Luffy and Fitz, having transformed back to normal and put his shirt and glasses back on, smiled at each other and both at the same time said, "Definitely. Alright, on a more serious note, I need both of you to promise that you won't tell anyone about me. That is my only requirement to train the both of you," said Dragon, no longer grinning to show the seriousness of his request. "Of course," they both said. Luffy and Fitz are finally setting sail in a small fishing boat that they were given by a fisherman of the village. The people from Windmill Village all came to see them off and waved to them as they set out to sea. Standing up on the small boat, they both waved back. Luffy, wearing white shorts frayed at the knees, a black long-sleeve button-up shirt left open, showing his well-toned body, and a pair of light brown sandals. Blowing in the wind around his neck is the scarf that Shanks gave him, and on his head, the black goggles. The lenses, having been replaced, were now a shade of gold that glistened in the sun. Belted to his waist on the left side was a saber with a black handle and a silver guard. Belted on his right side was a silver revolver with a wooden handle. Fitz was wearing black pants with a tint of purple in the threading, along with a silver short-sleeve button-up shirt, choosing to leave it buttoned, save for the two at the top, fitting his down-to-earth personality. Wearing black sandals, he adjusted his glasses with his left hand as he took out a book from his back pocket with his right and began reading. As they got further into the open ocean, there was a disturbance in the surface of the water. Luffy noticing just as a sea king broke through the water, its yellow scales glittering in the sunlight. It had a large bluefin that jutted out from its head and progressively got smaller as it went down its body, reaching its blue tail fin. Snarling with menacing red eyes and large fangs, it looked down on what it thought was its lunch with greed. Oh. Check it out, Fitz. It's the Lord of the Coast," Luffy said, pointing excitedly at the oversized carnivorous fish and turning to look at Fitz. "This is the perfect time to test out one of my new moves," he said. Turning back to the Sea King, which had begun to lunge at the small fishing boat, Luffy swiped his arm through the air, creating a circle in front of him. "Wait. Luffy. Don't," yelled Fitz, but it was too late. "Whirlwind," shouted Luffy as he let his arm fall back to his side, and just before the Sea King chomped down on the tiny fishing boat, it was lifted out of the ocean by what could only be described as a full-force tornado. The Sea King was thrown around by the intense winds and finally thrown out of the tornado. It was sent flying across the ocean only to disappear in the horizon. "Sujay. Did you see that, Fitz? Did you see that? Look how far it went," shouted Luffy with glee. He had failed to notice that his tornado had caused a whirlpool to form in the water. "Damn it, Luffy. Do you ever use your brain?" questioned Fitz angrily as the boat was tossed around by the rough waves. Luffy looked at Fitz and tilted his head to one side questioningly. "Alright, you got us into this mess, now get us out before we're sucked into that whirlpool," said Fitz quite commonly given the situation. Leaving Luffy to handle the situation, Fitz leaned up against the side of the boat and continued to read. "Sure thing," Luffy said as the boat began to lift off the water. "Which way should we go?" asked Luffy. "I don't know. How about that way?" Fitz offered, pointing in a random direction away from Windmill Village. "Alright," said Luffy. Before Luffy even finished his sentence, the boat took off through the sky in the direction Fitz had pointed. Luffy allowed the fishing boat to fly through the air a little while longer before releasing his hold over it. This turned out to be a mistake because at the speed the boat was moving, as soon as it hit the water it shattered into pieces, sending both Luffy and Fitz flying. As they went careening across the ocean, Luffy was laughing hysterically as he somersaulted through the air, his white scarf clinging to his neck and flowing freely through the air. Fitz, not having moved from his original position, licked his finger and turned the page of his book to continue reading as if nothing happened. As they continued to fly through the air, Luffy keeping both of them aloft while having the time of his life, a marine ship came into view. "Oh. A ship. I bet they have some food," exclaimed Luffy as he sent them toward the ship. Fitz put his book in his back pocket and turned in midair to face the ship. He was always wary when it came to Luffy stopping at the right time, so he prepared himself. Once they reached the ship, Fitz, going in feet first, shouted to Geppo as he kicked the air rapidly to slow himself down for a smooth landing. Luffy, having absolute control of the air, came to a complete stop just inches before running into the guardrail of the ship and stepped lightly onto the railing. "Food, food, food. Where's the food?" questioned Luffy as he went into a crouched position on the railing and sniffed the air. "Luffy, we probably shouldn't stay long. This is a marine vessel," said Fitz casually. "No problem. Let's just eat something and then go," said a drooling Luffy as he followed the scent of food in the air. "We should get another boat as well. I think it would appear rather conspicuous flying through the air," said Fitz more to himself than Luffy. "Sure thing," Luffy said, opening a door labeled storehouse. As Luffy and Fitz entered the storehouse, the Alvida pirates pulled up alongside the marine ship. Flash forward. "Kobe. Where are you?" yelled a pirate. "Over here," squeaked a small boy with pink hair and glasses too big for his face. "Alvida told us to make sure you don't try anything," said the pirate, who was now joined with two more of his crewmates. "Hey, is that a storeroom over there?" asked one of the pirates in a gruff voice. "Looks like it," said the first. "I bet there is some good rum in there," replied the third as they opened the door to the storeroom. As soon as they opened the door, a big gust of wind blew all three pirates into the guardrail. "See, Fitz, I told you I could open the door without touching it," said a proud Luffy. Fitz just shook his head and readjusted his glasses. "Oh, who are you?" asked Luffy, upon noticing the small boy with pink hair and glasses. My name's CC Kobe," stuttered the frightened boy. "Who are you guys?" "I'm Luffy and this is Fitz. We're looking for a boat, do you know where we can find one?" asked Luffy. I don't know, I'm on this ship because the Alvida pirates are looting it. Speaking of Alvida, you guys better get away from here. If Alvida knows you knocked out some of her crew, you'll be killed," said Kobe in a high-pitched frightened voice. "So you're a pirate, huh?" asked Luffy. No, I got onto Alvida's ship by mistake. I thought it was a fishing boat," Kobe said, embarrassed for himself. "Shahihi," laughed Luffy, "you idiot." This made Kobe turn red with even more embarrassment. "But I won't stay with Alvida forever. Someday I will be a marine and I'll catch pirates like Alvida," said Kobe proudly. "Exactly, who are you going to catch?" "Ha, Kobe," said a voice that sent chills down Kobe's spine. Turning around, Kobe came face to face with an extremely fat, extremely ugly lady. Seeing her iron mace, he squeaked in fear. "Who's this fat lady?" asked Luffy, causing Kobe's mouth to open and his eyes to nearly bulge out of their sockets. The three pirates that Luffy had knocked out before came to and started whispering to each other. "Do you think that's Rurano's Oro?" asked one. "Maybe he came for Alvida's head," commented another. "I wonder who the other guy is," said the third pirate. Hearing the whisperings of her crew, Alvida turned to Luffy and swung her iron mace down on him, shouting, "Whose head did you come for?" Luffy didn't move an inch as the iron mace just passed right through him, crashing into the planks of the ship. Fitz had been watching patiently the whole time, but had gotten fed up with this fat, ugly lady attacking Luffy. Slowly walking towards Alvida, Fitz adjusted his glasses. "Zoro," he said, and to everyone watching he disappeared. Fitz reappeared a fraction of a second later right in front of Alvida and delivered an uppercut to her chin, sending her flying across the ocean. "I guess I didn't get to hit her," said Luffy as he reappeared exactly where he was before, causing everyone's eyes to bulge out of their heads and their mouths to hit the floor. "Boy," Luffy shouted at Alvida's crew. "Get me, Fitz and Kobe a boat. Kobe wants to go become a marine." "Yes sir," shouted Alvida's crew as they all scampered to find a boat for these fearsome people. Flash forward. Luffy, Fitz and Kobe were now sitting on a small fishing boat on the open ocean. "Where are we headed now?" asked Kobe as the small boat was rocked by the waves. "Well, those guys mentioned a guy named Urano as Zoro, so I'm gonna go see if he's a good guy, and if he is ill have him join my pirate crew," stated Luffy. "Oh, by the way, where is he?" "But that guy is a demon, and besides he's been captured by the Marines and is being held prisoner at a Marine base on a nearby island," said Kobe. "Well, that makes things easier," stated Fitz. "You can become a Marine and we can see if Zoro is fit for our crew." "You guys said you are pirates, right? Then what is your dream?" asked Kobe curiously. "I'm gonna be the king of the pirates," shouted Luffy. "And I'm just following this guy," said Fitz, pointing at Luffy with his thumb. Kobe started to object, saying it would be impossible, but Luffy just ignored him. "Onward to the Marine base to get a new crew member," yelled Luffy, and the boat picked up speed and shot off towards the island. Arriving at the Marine base island at a ridiculous speed, Luffy stopped the boat just before it destroyed the dock, sending both Fitz and Kobe flying towards a nearby house. Luffy had no problem and started walking as soon as the boat stopped. Fitz, shouting Geppo, kicked off the air rapidly to slow himself down. Sticking out his left hand, he caught Kobe just before he hit the house, saving him from a bruise or two. Fitz adjusted his glasses and followed Luffy down the street through the town, while Kobe walked behind them looking at the two monsters with amazement. "Hey Kobe," Luffy said, turning to Kobe as they walked through the town. "You're a good navigator. We actually got to the place we were going." He finished with an ear-to-ear grin. "Well, that's the basics of navigating," said Kobe timidly. "Where's food?" asked Luffy, choosing to ignore Kobe's answer and look around the town curiously. "That looks like a good place over there," Fitz said, pointing to a small restaurant. "We'll eat there and then go to the Marine base." Flash forward. "Looks like this is where we part ways," Luffy said to Kobe as they stopped in front of the doors to the Marine base. An 8 feet high brick wall surrounded the base, and the entrance was 2-3 feet thick iron doors. There were 6 buildings that could be seen from the front, 4 of which looked like ordinary houses with cannons on the roofs. The 2 main buildings were in the center and resembled large cones that had their tops cut off. The smaller cone-like building was slightly in front of the other, but the other, being twice as tall, was clearly visible. "I don't think I'm prepared yet," said Kobe. While Kobe was talking, Luffy found some boxes and propped them against a wall so that he could stand on them and look over. "I wonder if Zoro is around here," said Luffy as he made his way up the makeshift ladder of boxes. "No way, he would be out in the open. He must be in a dark cell somewhere under the base," Kobe replied as he slowly made his way up to look over the wall. Fitz, content staying on the ground, sat on an extra box and began reading. "Is that him?" asked Luffy as he pointed to the man that was tied to a cross in the middle of the field. Kobe had finally made it high enough on the wall to look over, but as soon as he did he promptly fell all the way back down. Why yeah, that's him," stuttered Kobe, completely scared of Zoro's presence. The man that Kobe was so frightened of was an average-sized, muscular young man. He wore a black bandana tied around his head, a loose white shirt that had a 3-button placket at the neck, a green haramaki around his waist, and black pants tucked into his black boots. On his left ear were 3 identical golden earrings. Both his forearms were pulled back behind the horizontal bar of the cross and tied at the elbow. He was also tied to the vertical post around his waist, his feet sticking outward as the result of being unable to stand up straight. Kobe slowly made his way back up the pile of boxes, but by the time he was able to look over the wall, Luffy had disappeared. "So you're Urano as Zoro," Luffy said as he appeared in front of Zoro. "Where did he come from?" thought Zoro. "I must be more exhausted than I thought." Just the 2 Marines opened the gate to the field and escorted another young man in, wearing what looked like an expensive suit. He had a huge cleft chin, and his blonde hair was cut in the shape of a football. "Run," whispered Zoro urgently, but when he looked up there was no one there. "Wait for me by the gate," said the young man to the 2 Marines that had escorted him. "Yes, Helmeppo sir," they replied. "I didn't think you had this kind of endurance," Helmeppo said, as he looked Zoro up and down. "I came out here because I thought you'd be dead by now." "You better keep your promise, you bastard son," spat Zoro, looking at the young man with disgust. "You better watch your tongue, Zoro. You know my dad is Captain Morgan, right?" he asked as he turned to walk away. "I will keep my promise. If you survive the rest of the month I will release you," were his final words before the gate closed and he was gone. "You again?" said Zoro in surprise as he noticed Luffy standing in front of him again. "What do you want?" I'm looking for someone to join my pirate crew, answered Luffy. I was thinking of releasing you so you could join me. I'll never become a pirate, said Zoro, because I have something that I have to do. And besides, I'll last to the end of the month and be free of this place without your help. Wait. Squeaked Kobe as he ran up to Luffy and Zoro, having climbed over the wall. I just heard Helmeppo bragging to those two marines that he is going to execute you tomorrow. Well, that decides it then, said Luffy happily. Fine, if you free me from here I will join you, but first you have to get my katanas from that bastard's son, said Zoro. Alright. I'll be right back, Luffy said as he turned around and walked towards the gate. Hey, Fitz, Luffy shouted. He said he would join if we got his katanas. Fitz climbed over the wall and joined Luffy as they walked towards the main base. Alright, Luffy said as they came to the entrance of the main building. Let's start on the roof. I'll race you to the top, he said as his feet disappeared and he took off towards the roof. Hey, you got a head start, shouted Fitz as spiky leathery wings sprouted from his back and he sped off to the top of the building. On the roof of the main building stood Captain Morgan, otherwise known as Axe Hand Morgan, giving orders as all the marines on the base were struggling to erect a giant statue of Morgan himself. Captain Axe Hand Morgan was a large man with tan skin. He wore the marine overcoat on his shoulders, and his most distinguishing features were his iron chin and of course the axe that was embedded in his forearm. Be careful, you idiots, roared Morgan. If any of you harm that statue in any way I will personally execute you. Yes sir, came the reply for the marines as they struggled to pull the ropes that kept the statue from falling. Haha, laughed Luffy as he landed on the face of the statue. I beat you, Fitz. That's only because you had a head start, Fitz replied as he landed next to the statue, having already hit his wings so as not to attract attention, but being with Luffy, it probably wouldn't have made a difference. Hhhhh, screamed Luffy. What is it, Luffy? Asked a worried Fitz. I just landed on a giant face, he yelled as he stomped on the statue's face. This caused the marines to lose control of their ropes and sent the statue towards the roof where it shattered into pieces. Damn it, Luffy, Fitz said to himself as he grabbed a marine by the back of his uniform. Take me to Helmeppo's room. Now, yelled Fitz at the marine. Oh, of course, just don't hurt me, said the marine. Luffy, follow me, shouted Fitz as he went through the door and down into the main base. Dear, this is it. Helmeppo's room, said the marine. Alright, now get out of here, Fitz said as he threw him down the hall. Good job, Fitz, Luffy said as he appeared next to Fitz inside Helmeppo's room. Alright, grab his swords and let's get back down to Zoro, said Fitz as he looked out the window. Luffy, hurry up and get down there. The marines are gonna execute Zoro now. Grabbing the 3 swords that were propped up against the fireplace, Luffy ran towards the window and disappeared. On the field, Kobe was trying to untie Zoro as the marines lined up, pointing their rifles at Zoro and Kobe. Ready, aim, fire, shouted Morgan. While the bullets were headed towards Zoro and Kobe, Luffy appeared between them and the projectiles. He put out his hand and shouted, "Air freeze." Zoro blinked his eyes because he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The 6 bullets that were fired were now covered in ice and were stopped in midair. The marines, just as confused as Zoro, could feel their mouths gaping open in surprise. Luffy gave a childish grin before he yelled, "Air blast." The 6 bullets that were hanging in the air were sent back at the marines, each bullet flying into the guns that fired them, making a small explosion in each firearm and causing the marines holding the guns to drop them. Fitz, who had flown down unseen in the confusion, united Zoro. "Here you go, Zoro," Luffy said as he handed Zoro his 3 katanas. "Let's see what you got." "If guns don't work, attack with your swords," yelled Morgan furiously. The 6 marines that had fired grabbed their swords and charged towards Zoro. All of them went for downward slices, intending to cut him in half, but Zoro had other plans. Stopping all 6 swords above his head with the 2 katanas in his hands and the 1 in his mouth, he pushed them all back with brute strength, causing them to fall down. As they got back up, intending to charge again, Fitz transformed his hand into a gargoyle claw and said, "Zoro." He disappeared for about a second and a half and reappeared standing next to Luffy, his hand back to normal. The 6 marines that were charging all stopped and screamed as blood gushed from the claw wound that went from shoulder to hip on each of their bodies. "Arg, you worthless cum," yelled Morgan at the fallen marines. "I have to do everything myself," he said as he shrugged off his overcoat and began to charge. Luffy took out the silver revolver that he had belted on his right side. Pointing it at Morgan, he pulled the trigger 3 times. There was no recoil and no sound at all. The only evidence that Luffy had fired was the fact that Morgan flew backwards and went through the side of the main base. "What was that?" questioned Zoro. "I ate the air devil fruit," responded Luffy with a grin. I can become and control the air, and for that attack I compress the air in the empty chambers of my revolver and let the gun's mechanism do the rest. What about before, when you stop those bullets and turn them to ice? Asked Zoro again. For that I increase the density of the air around each bullet. When I increase the density the air gets colder, but I didn't actually freeze the bullets, I just froze the air around them. Wow, said Zoro, impressed by his new captain's power. Looks like I made a good choice in joining your crew. While Luffy and Zoro were talking, Morgan managed to pick himself out of the rubble. Noticing Morgan moving again, Luffy began to walk towards him. Stop! Came a high-pitched scream. Luffy turned in the direction of the voice to see Helmeppo holding a gun to Baby's head. If you move another step I'll kill this boy, yelled Helmeppo. Boy, Luffy, you need help with this? Asked Fitz and Zoro in unison. They both looked at each other confusedly and then back at Luffy, pretending nothing happened. Nah, I got this, said Luffy as he cocked his fist. Hey, I told you not to move or I'll shoot, yelled Helmeppo unconvincingly. Luffy, taking no heed to the cowardly boy's demands, cocked his fist and delivered a punch seemingly at nothing, shouting adjustment punch. As soon as the words left his mouth he disappeared. Everyone that was watching felt their mouths gaping open and their eyes bulging from their sockets out of surprise. Luffy then appeared behind Helmeppo. The punch he had thrown at nothing before was now heading towards the back of Helmeppo's head. Luffy first made contact with Helmeppo's head and sent him flying across the field, allowing the momentum his body had from the force of the punch to flip him upside down in the air. Luffy then did a scissor kick in the air, kicking out with his left foot and shouting, "Correction kick," he disappeared again. Luffy then appeared right in front of Captain Morgan and allowing the momentum of the scissor kick he executed before to carry his foot right under Captain Morgan's chin, he sent Morgan flying straight up. Luffy, appearing next to Zoro and shading his eyes, watched as Captain Morgan came hurtling back to the ground. Whoa. He sure went high, Luffy said to Zoro. Yeah, he did, replied Zoro. Turning towards the source of the voice and seeing Luffy, Zoro jumped back in surprise. WSHH, don't just appear next to someone like that, yelled Zoro, his eyes bulging out of his head and his teeth razor sharp. When Morgan finally hit the ground, the force of him crashing to earth caused a dust cloud to spread circularly away from the impact point. As the dust cleared, Zoro walked forward to stop on Luffy's left side as he sheathed his katanas. Fitz walked forward and stood at Luffy's right, asking, "What should we do about the rest of these guys?" The Marines, finally able to see that their captain had been beaten, threw their weapons down and their hats in the air, shouting, "We're finally free. He did it. He beat Captain Morgan." As the cheers rang out, Zoro collapsed. Luffy, Fitz and Zoro were walking down the middle of the street, having reached Orange Town without incident. The food supplies they got at the Marine base island were already gone. They were stopping to resupply when they noticed someone running towards them. "Who's that?" asked Luffy. "It looks like a girl," replied Fitz. "And she's being chased by 3 men that look like pirates," added Zoro. As the girl came closer, they could see more of what she looked like. She had orange hair and wore a white t-shirt that had blue around the collar and sleeves, along with blue strips that went around the chest and stomach area with 2 strips around the bottom fringe of the shirt. She had an orange miniskirt on that had a white circle on each side, as well as orange boots that came up to the middle of her shins. Spotting the 3 of them, the girl slowed down a little to let the pirates chasing her catch up. Once she reached Luffy, who was walking ahead of Zoro and Fitz, she hid behind him. "Oh good, boss, you're here. I let you deal with these guys," she said loud enough for the 3 chasing her to hear, and then she took off running away from where a fight was bound to break out. "Damn it. There she goes again," said one of the pirates. "That's alright. We've got her boss right here," another one said. It looks like they want to fight," said Fitz, adjusting his glasses. "I guess we'll have to give them what they want," said Luffy, repositioning his goggles on his head and scratching where they had been. "Sure thing, Captain, I guess we'll each take one," said Zoro with a smile. If a normal person had been watching, it would have seemed like the 3 pirates that were attacking fell unconscious for no reason. To someone with a trained eye, this person would have to be extremely well trained. They would have seen Zoro perform a blindingly fast quick draw attack and knock one pirate out with the back of his sword. They would have seen Fitz use Zoro and knock another one out with a quick yet powerful jab, and they would have seen Luffy do nothing as the pirate attacking him fell unconscious. "What did you just do to him?" asked Zoro curiously. "I just strengthened the air in front of him and let him knock himself unconscious," said Luffy with a grin. "Wow, you guys are really strong. I didn't even see you guys move," the girl said with admiration as she jumped down from an overhang of a nearby house. "Who are you?" asked Luffy. "I'm a thief that only steals from pirates. My name is Nami. Do you want to be partners with me?" she asked hopefully. "Nice to meet you, Nami, but the answer is no," Luffy said as the 3 of them continued up the street. Wait up, Nami said as she walked after them. What are you guys doing here anyways? She asked. We're just here to get more food supplies, answered Fitz. And what do you do besides thieving? He asked. I'm a navigator and I draw maps, Nami replied. You're a navigator? Asked Luffy. The best in East Blue, she answered proudly. Then you should join my pirate crew. We're going to the Grand Line and I'm gonna become the Pirate King, Luffy said happily. No way. I won't be a pirate. I just steal from them, said Nami. By the way, who were those guys that were chasing you? Asked Zoro. They were part of Buggy the Pirate's crew and they were chasing me because I stole this map of the Grand Line. I just wish I could have gotten his treasure too, said Nami sadly. How about this? If we help you get Buggy's treasure then you can be our navigator, proposed Fitz. Yeah, that sounds good, let's do that, said Luffy excitedly. Nami said as she thought it over. Okay fine, if you can help me get his treasure, then I'll be okay with a temporary partnership. Flash forward. Luffy, Nami, Zoro and Fitz walked to the place where Buggy's base was supposed to be. When they got there from the top of the building they heard. Ready the cannon. I wonder what they're doing up there, said Luffy. Oh no, we have to get out of here. They're aiming the cannon down at us. Panicked Nami as she pointed to the roof of the building the voice was heard from. Sure enough there was a cannon aimed right at them. It's alright, said Luffy calmly, while Zoro and Fitz nodded. If Luffy says we're safe here then we're safe, said Fitz. Are you guys crazy? Nami said as the order to fire was heard. There was a loud bang and the cannonball was sent right at them. Luffy simply put up his hand and yelled, "Air freeze." The cannonball stopped in mid-flight as the air around was frozen solid. "Air blast," shouted Luffy, sending the cannonball back where it came from and destroying the entire building. As the smoke cleared there were only 3 people still conscious. One was riding a white lion, another somehow managed to stay balanced on a unicycle and was pointing a sword at them. The third and final one was assumed to be Buggy by Luffy. Buggy had his face painted like a clown and a big red nose. He wore an orange pirate hat and a red and white striped shirt along with light green pants and red shoes with yellow buckles. On his shoulders he wore a captain's overcoat, the same orange color as his hat. You dare attack Buggy the pirate? Buggy practically screeched at the 4 of them. You're the one that attacked us, complained Nami. Kabaji attacked them. Make them regret ever seeing me, screeched Buggy again. Yes sir, Kabaji said as he made his way over to the attackers on his unicycle. That one is a swordsman. I'll take him, said Zoro as the other 3 backed out of the way to give him some space. I'll try to make this quick, he said. Tying his bandana around his head, he unsheathed his 3 swords, putting Wado Ichimonji, his most precious sword, in his mouth. Keeping it parallel to the ground he then crossed the 2 katanas in his hands in front of Wado to form an X in front of him. To think you could even beat me at all was the last mistake you will make, said Kabaji menacingly as he sped towards his target with his sword pointed at him. Zoro didn't move until Kabaji was 3 feet from him and at that point he yelled "Demon Slash" and disappeared. Having run past Kabaji, Zoro reappeared and came to a sliding stop 5 feet on the other side of Kabaji. Zoro slowly stood up and it was only after he sheathed his swords that Kabaji's chest started gushing blood from the 3 gashes. Zoro untied his bandana and retired it around the bicep of his left arm. Walking over to Luffy and the others, he gave Fitz a high five as if to tag him in for the next fight. Nami, who barely saw what happened, stood gaping at Zoro. It's not polite to stare at people with your mouth hanging open like that, said Zoro, noticing Nami. Sorry, Nami said as she turned back to see how Fitz was doing. Moji, shrieked Buggy. Kill them, Nuo. He screamed as the man riding the lion coaxed it out to face Fitz. I am called Moji, the animal tamer. This is Richie, he said pointing to the lion he was riding on. Prepare to meet your death, he said as Richie charged towards Fitz. Whatever, said Fitz as he dodged Richie's paw swipe using dot. Because he dodged backwards, Fitz was now a good distance away from Richie and Moji. Transforming his hand into a gargoyle claw, he just stood there waiting for Moji to make his move. You're a quick one, said Moji, but you can't dodge forever, he continued as Richie began charging again. As soon as Richie moved, Fitz took a step forward and swung his hand from the ground towards Richie, saying Renkyakutsume, storm leg claw variation. The result was 5 blue crescent blades that started off small but increased in size as they flew towards Richie. The lion didn't even know what hit him. Roaring in pain, he collapsed as blood streamed out of his 5 freshly inflicted wounds. Moji, after gaining his balance and seeing what happened to Richie, charged at Fitz. Fitz simply punched him in the face, having transformed his hand back to normal. He didn't want to kill Moji, just knock him out. Fitz came back over to Luffy and the rest. As he adjusted his glasses, Zoro slapped him on the back. You have to teach that move to me, he said with a smile. If we can find the time then sure," said Fitz as he took out his book, sat down against a nearby house and began reading. "Looks like you're out of people's red noses," yelled Luffy with a grin. "Argu has a big red nose. He'll kill you," screamed Buggy as he ran towards Luffy brandishing a sword wildly. Luffy simply ducked under Buggy's slash and spinning on his foot with his arm extended he shouted, "Sharp hair." The result was Buggy being completely cleaved in half, but the strange thing was that there was no blood and Buggy was laughing hysterically. "I ate the chop fruit," said Buggy with a maniacal grin plastered on his face. "I can't be cut by anything." While he was saying this, Buggy shot his hand that was holding 3 knives at Luffy. "Interesting," said Luffy as Buggy's attack passed right through his face. "Why it?" yelled Buggy in surprise. "You aren't the only one that has the power of the devil," said Luffy as his face reformed. "I think it's about time to end this," he said. His hand was in a position as though he was holding something. He started running towards Buggy and yelled, "Air hammer." In his hand was now a long transparent hammer. The only reason anyone else could see it was because Luffy had strengthened it enough for the outline of the weapon to appear as a distortion in the air. Luffy continued running at Buggy and swinging the air hammer from his side he attacked him. Buggy, who was so surprised by what had just happened, was unable to react and took the attack right in the chest. The force of the blow sent him flying out of the town and he disappeared in the horizon. Flash forward. The townspeople were now treating the saviors of Orange Town to a feast. Luffy was still eating long after everyone had their fill. Nami, who had gotten her hands on all of Buggy's treasure along with the map to the Grand Line, was in high spirits, enjoying her time with pirates for the first time in her life. "On behalf of the town, I would like to thank the 4 of you for saving us," toasted the mayor of Orange Town after all the noise had died down. "We don't have much value that we can give you as a reward, but please take Buggy's ship as your own. We have some shipwrights in town that can give the ship a makeover. You can choose how it will look." The mayor finished. "Woohoo," yelled Luffy. "We finally got a ship." Over the next couple of weeks, the 4 saviors of Orange Town were treated luxuriously while they waited for the renovations to their new ship to be done. After some time the mayor summoned them to the dock and with a smile, he ordered the tarp covering the ship to be taken off. "Wow," all 4 said in unison, their mouths gaping open in awe. The ship they saw before them had no resemblance to Buggy's old ship, Big Top, whatsoever. From the keel of the ship to midway up the hull it was painted a dark blue, almost black. The rest of the hull was a light blue with white diagonal streaks through it, and the guardrail of the ship was a gold color. The 3 masts were left unpainted save for the spiral of gold going up each, and the crow's nest atop the middle and tallest of the 3 main masts was painted the same light blue as the hull, with the same white diagonal streaks through it. The figurehead, as per Luffy's request, was the head of an osprey with its beak open. If the ship were coming at you head-on, because of the white streaks on the hull looking almost like feathers on a bird's wings, it would look like a bird of prey was attacking. On the side of the hull was the name of the ship. Emblazoned in large gold letters was the name, the Osprey. There were also pirate flags waving in the wind atop the 3 main masts. The image depicted on them, painted by Nami, was a standard skull with Luffy's goggles painted on. Underneath it, 2 white-tipped light blue bird wings were crossed taking the place of the crossbones normally associated with pirates. After giving their thanks to the townspeople and the mayor, the 4 saviors of Orange Town boarded their new ship. "This ship is amazing and huge," shouted Luffy with glee, running all over the ship and checking out each and every feature. "It's definitely more luxurious than the fishing boat we've been using," added Fitz as he looked over the Osprey, which was more than 5x the size of the boat they arrived in. "It's definitely more spacious," said Zoro with a grin as he sat down, leaning against the guardrail. Luffy, coming out of the captain's quarters, located at the back of the ship, came down the left set of stairs to stand on the deck and said, "Whoa, there's a big kitchen next to my room that has a dining table in it. And there are a bunch of rooms down here." Luffy shouted after going through the door that was directly in the middle of the 2 staircases that were on either side of the ship and behind the back main mast. "One thing though," Nami said after coming out of the kitchen having put the supplies that the villagers had given them away. "How do you plan on sailing this ship, Luffy? It's almost impossible with just the 4 of us." "That's easy," said Luffy, now standing in front of the captain's quarters at the wheel of the ship. He held out his hand and shouted, "Air control." Everything on the ship began to move seemingly by itself. The sails unfurled themselves and the wheel of the ship began spinning, allowing the ship to sail away from Orange Town. "Forget I asked," said Nami with awe, more to herself than anyone. Waving and shouting their last goodbyes to the people of Orange Town, the Osprey sailed out into the open sea. As a new island came into view, Fitz shouted for everyone to brace themselves just as the ship took off towards the island, aided by Luffy. The ship came to a perfect stop just before the shallows. "Luffy, warn us next time you are going to speed up the ship," yelled Zoro pissed off after almost being thrown off the ship. And then warn us the next time you are going to stop the ship, shouted Nami, rubbing the bump on her head, courtesy of the middle mainmast. It took a little while before either of them realized that Luffy was no longer on board the ship. Damn, maybe we should tell him to warn us when he is going to disappear, said Zoro to himself as he lowered the anchor. You guys will just have to get used to it, he does it all the time, said Fitz as he got on one of the extra boats and lowered it once Zoro and Nami had boarded. Once they got to land and caught up with Luffy, they checked their surroundings. They had just walked onto a sandy beach at the base of a steep cliff. On top of the cliff, from what they could see, were a lot of trees. As they started walking towards the cliff, a male voice shouted out. You have just entered my territory. I am the proud captain of 80,000 men and each has their rifle aimed at you. Luffy, who could tell his location by the way the air blew around him, appeared behind the source of the mystery voice. The youth standing before him had curly, bushy black hair that he covered with a cross-stitched pattern, dark yellow bandana. He wore a one-piece brown outfit with suspenders over his shoulders to hold it all together. The pants part of the outfit was rolled midway up the shin. He was wearing big, round, green shoes and a light blue cloth around his waist. In his hand he held a green slingshot and over his shoulder he had a small brown bag. His most distinct feature was his extremely long nose. Who are you? Asked Luffy, tilting his head to the side. I'm nice to meet you, said the young man Luffy had tracked the voice to. It took a couple of moments before Usopp's brain registered that the teenager standing before him was the same teenager that had just been at the bottom of the cliff, the very same teenager that had come to the island in a pirate ship. Wah, the boy in front of him screamed in a high-pitched voice. Don't sneak up behind people when they are on a cliff and talking to pirates. So you have 80,000 men under your command? Asked Luffy genuinely. Well, it's too bad for you, but I could beat them all without any help. He said proudly. Wah, don't talk to me, Pira. Wait a second, there's no way you could beat 80,000 men, said Usopp. Of course I can, stated Luffy. No, there is no way that you could, it's just not possible, replied Usopp. Bring your 80,000 men out here so that I can show you, said Luffy, ready for a fight. Well, that would be kind of hard because I don't have anyone under me, said Usopp before stopping himself after realizing what he was saying. Wahhhh, don't trick people into telling the truth, screamed Usopp in a high-pitched voice once again. I knew he was lying, said Nami after joining them, having found an inclined path to walk up with Zoro and Fitz. Wahhhh. Pirate, screamed Usopp after noticing Nami and the others. Don't worry, we aren't your typical pirates. We just came here for supplies, said Fitz, trying to reassure the teenager. You must have come from a village, said Zoro. Do you think you can show us where to stock up? He asked. Well, if you aren't here for violence then I guess it's okay to bring you into the town, said Usopp as he walked in a direction away from the cliffside. Having made their way into town, they stopped to get a bite to eat or, in Luffy's case, much more than one. They were sitting at a table when Usopp became talkative. So you guys are real pirates? Asked Usopp excitedly. Yeah, we're heading to the Grand Line and stopped at this island to resupply, answered Fitz. Well, if you guys are pirates then how about I join you? Asked Usopp. If I join then I will definitely be the captain, right? He asked hopefully with a large grin on his face. You idiot, Luffy said between mouthfuls of meat. That position is already filled. He continued as he hit Usopp in the head with a bone of the meat he had just devoured. Besides, we barely know you, said Fitz. What can you do? I'm the best marksman in East Blue, Usopp said proudly, pointing to himself with his thumb. Really? Asked Nami. You lied to us when we first met, so I don't think I believe you. Well then how about I show you? Leading his new pirate friends into the forest, they came to a clearing. On the side of the clearing they entered from there was a huge oak tree, and opposite the oak tree across was another smaller tree that stood a good distance away. The tree had a lot of markings in it, showing it to be a typical target used for practice. As they walked into the clearing, Usopp climbed the big oak tree. What's he doing up there? Wondered Nami out loud. I hope he isn't running away from the challenge, she said as Usopp dropped back to the grassy ground. He held in his hand a box about the length of a rifle. Opening the box he took out a strange-looking weapon. What is that? Asked Fitz, now curious. My dad gave me this rifle, and I modified it by putting 2 detachable crossbows on it, answered Usopp proudly. I call it the trifecta. Taking the weapon from Usopp, Fitz began examining it. It was a regular long-shot rifle, but with the addition of 2 crossbows, one attached to the top and one to the bottom. Both crossbows were attached on opposite sides of the muzzle of the rifle, and there was a small crank on the rifle and between both crossbows to adjust the angle of the crossbows. If the crank were to be turned all the way, the crossbows would be at right angles to the rifle muzzle, allowing the shooter to hit targets on either side of him. I see, said Fitz, still holding the trifecta. While Fitz had been examining the trifecta, Usopp had strapped a box containing crossbow bolts to the outside of both legs. "You've made it so that when they are attached they can all be fired by pulling the trigger of the rifle," he said after finally looking up from the weapon. "Not only that, but I put a setting on it so that you can either fire all three at the same time, both crossbows alone or the rifle by itself," said Usopp, proud of his creation. "I understand the concept, but theoretically it would almost be impossible to aim," Fitz replied. "That's why I'm going to show you," said Usopp with a mischievous smile. "Nami, could you push that button for me?" he asked after he had loaded the rifle along with both crossbows and pointed to a button attached to a wire by her foot. When she pressed the button, targets began to pop up around the edge of the clearing. As soon as the first target became visible, Usopp put the butt of the rifle against his shoulder and turned the crank. Just as the target became fully visible, Usopp pulled the trigger to fire all three weapons at once. The first target that became visible was hit dead center with a bullet, while two other targets on either side of Usopp were hit directly in the middle by crossbow bolts. "Tsujay," said Luffy with stars in his eyes, his mouth gaping open. "That is quite amazing," said Fitz, admiring the sharpshooter's handiwork. "It's not over yet," Usopp said. Another target popped up at their right. Usopp fired the rifle and hit the target dead center with a bullet. As two more targets popped up on the left, Usopp, turning the crank back so that the crossbows were at their default setting, spun and fired the crossbows, hitting both targets in the middle. Just then 6 targets came up in front of Usopp and started moving towards him. Loading the 2 crossbows by using the boxes on the outside of his legs, Usopp was able to take out both targets in the blink of an eye. He repeated the same method of fast reloading to dispatch the next 4, turning to the 4 pirates with a smug look on his face. "That was pretty impressive," said Zoro. "Yeah, you should definitely join our crew," added Luffy, the stars in his eyes having faded. "Your lies will definitely be something entertaining," joked Nami. "And I would love to hear how you made that weapon," said Fitz, still admiring the trifecta. "Woohoo, I'm gonna be a pirate and become a brave warrior of the sea," yelled Usopp, jumping into the air. "But I have to go say goodbye to Kaya. I'll meet you guys by the ship later," said Usopp as he ran off. "Who's Kaya?" everyone asked themselves. While Usopp was saying his goodbyes to Kaya, Luffy and company walked back to the Osprey. When they reached the cliff, they saw a ship pulling up to shore. "I know that ship," said Fitz. "That's the ship that used to be captained by the Thousand Plans Kuro. But I thought he was captured and executed a while ago," he continued. The ship had a light green keel and a red hull, with black lines about 8 feet apart, going from guardrail to guardrail. The figurehead was that of a black cat with an open mouth. There was a cat paw on each side of the ship on the guardrails, giving it the appearance of a cat trying to escape from the ship. It had 2 main masts with the sails being the generic white color. As they watched the ship, pirates began jumping out and wading through the shallows to get to shore. Once they were all on shore, a man dressed in a strange outfit came into view. He was wearing a white shirt and light brown pants under a blue captain's coat. The coat had a tan outline around it and tan-colored rings up and down the right side, where buttons should be. He wore a cowboy hat, brown gloves and heart-shaped sunglasses with red lenses. His white socks went up to the middle of his shins, and his shoes were a light shade of black. The goatee on his chin jutted 3 inches outward and was red with a black spiral through it. After giving orders to the pirates, they all stormed up the incline that would lead to the village. "It seems like they are planning on attacking the village," said Fitz casually. "Should we allow them to pass the captain?" Zoro asked, his left hand on his katanas. "Of course not, we can't let them do anything to my sharpshooter's village," said Luffy, punching his right fist into the palm of his left hand. As the attacking pirates made their way up a slope, Luffy stood facing them with his hand out in front of him, while Fitz transformed both his hands into claws. "We'll take out these guys," said Luffy. "Zoro runs through after we attack and takes out any that we miss," he continued. "Sure thing, Captain," said Zoro as he tied his bandana to his head and took out his katana. "Air blast," yelled Luffy, and at the same time Fitz yelled Rankyakutsume. An extremely powerful blast of wind came rushing down the slope. Fitz's attack got sucked into the blast of air, but still kept its shape. The blue blades that came from his claws started swirling with the wind. "Storm," they shouted as their combined attack was released. The first of the attacking pirates to get hit by Luffy and Fitz's combined attack were launched into the sea by the force of the wind. The rest of them weren't so lucky. 50 men were sent flying by Luffy's air blast, and having been cut by Fitz's attack, they were gushing blood as they soared into the ocean. Zoro, who had taken off running down the slope just after the combined attack was released, knocked out all the pirates that the storm attack somehow missed, hitting each in the back of the head with the sides of his swords. As Zoro reached the attacker's ship, he saw the strange man that had given the order to attack. "Are you prepared to die?" Zoro asked her. "Will you surrender?" Usopp had returned with a giant backpack full of his supplies just before Luffy and Fitz's attack. He stood with his mouth gaping open. He had just seen about 50 men completely obliterated by the attack, neither Luffy nor Fitz barely needing to lift a finger. Usopp had continued to watch as what could only be described as a green demon raced down the slope and dispatched anyone lucky enough to avoid the monstrous attack. As Usopp continued to watch, Zoro was talking with a strange-looking man. "We're not done yet," said the strange man, shaking from fear. Just as he said it, 2 more pirates jumped down from the ship. "Come here, Sham and Bucci," the strange man said. "Yes, Django," the 2 pirates answered as they walked up to Django. Sham had a large amount of green hair that he had parted to the left side of his cat-like face. His sharp claws and playful grin were a strange combination. His partner, Bucci, was more of a heavy-set man. The black spot over his left eye looked almost like it was part of the short black hair on his head, giving him the appearance of a cow. He had the same deadly-looking claws as Sham and also sported a cowbell around his neck. Django had taken out a circular blade and swung it back and forth in front of the 2 pirates' faces. "When I count to 3 you will be much stronger," said Django, still swinging his oversized necklace. 1, 2, 3, he finished, covering his eyes with the brim of his hat. "Boy, what's the hold up here?" shouted Zoro. The 2 pirates turned to face him. Both of them seemed to have changed. Their muscles bulged and their eyes turned completely white as though they were possessed. To test their newfound strength, Sham punched the cliff side, making rocks fly in every direction. When the dust cleared, a quarter of the cliff was missing. "Damn, I'd better not let them get too close to me," Zoro thought to himself as he got into his demon/stance. "I think I'll try to copy Fitz's attack," said Zoro as the 2 pirates started charging at him. "Rankyaku demon/" yelled Zoro. 3 small blue blades started flying towards the assailants. Sham was hit by 2 of the blue blades, and spurts of blood started coming from the wounds on his chest, one going from his right shoulder blade to his left pectoral, and the other gash went across his chest, effectively incapacitating him. The 3rd blue blade that Zoro released slashed Bucci diagonally across his chest. The force of the attack pushed him back, but he recovered quickly due to the large amount of fat on his body and continued charging Zoro. "Damn, I need to work on that attack," thought Zoro as he parried Bucci's claw attacks furiously. It seemed like it was all over for Zoro as he was pushed into the cliffside and Bucci was about to land a devastating blow with his claws. Just before the attack hit him, Zoro bent low and pushed off of the cliffside. Spinning so that his back was only inches from the ground, Zoro parried a claw attack with his left katana and slashed Bucci's legs with his right katana and the one in his mouth. As Zoro hit the ground and continued sliding, Bucci did as well, unable to stand due to the wounds inflicted by Zoro. Once Zoro was up, he went over to check on his opponent and found that he had passed out from blood loss. "Django?" yelled a voice from the top of the slope. "Why is there a delay?" the voice asked. "I'm sorry, Captain Kuro, but these pirates are far too strong for us," said Django. "You're Captain Kuro?" asked Usopp furiously, having recognized him as Kaya's butler Kurahedel. Kuro was wearing a black suit with a black tie and white dress shirt. The shoes he was wearing were gray with black stripes. On his hands he had black gloves, but instead of fingers he had attached 10 short swords. To avoid cutting himself with the blades on his fingers, he adjusted his glasses with the palm of his hand and gave Usopp a menacing look. "Usopp, stay where you are. Don't attack him. He's dangerous," yelled Fitz, worried about their new recruit. As all this was going on, Nami had snuck onto the invading pirates' ship and stolen their treasure. She was taking the bags of loot back to the Osprey when Django noticed her. Taking out the circular metal necklace he had used to hypnotize Sham and Bucci, he spun it on his finger and launched it at the thief. Noticing Django's attack, Usopp aimed the trifecta and fired the rifle. Hearing the gunshot, everyone looked up, seeing Nami about to be cut by the speeding ring launched by Django. Just before the blade hit her neck, Usopp shot it out of the air. He then aimed for Django and pulled the trigger, hitting him in the shoulder. Surprised that he made the shot, Usopp looked around to see if anyone saw it. "He'll make a great addition to the crew," said Luffy happily. Everyone in the crew smiled and nodded, agreeing with their captain's statement. "That is enough," yelled Kuro. "Stealth foot," he said as he disappeared. To Luffy, Zoro and Fitz, it was plain as day where the pirate captain went, but Usopp, Django and Nami were unable to follow him with their eyes. Kuro was moving at high speed towards Usopp. "You'll be the first to taste the blade of my cat claw," he said as he raised his right hand preparing to strike. Just before Kuro's blades cut Usopp, Luffy appeared on Kuro's left with an intimidating look in his eye. Pointing his silver revolver at Kuro's chest, Luffy pulled the trigger twice. Kuro was sent twisting and somersaulting through the air, only to impact with the side of the cliff, causing a large amount of dust to come up as the rubble hit the ground. "You think I would just let you hurt one of my?" asked Luffy with a dark look in his eyes. "That was quite an attack," said Kuro. "What did you do?" he asked, picking himself up out of the rubble. "I just compressed the air in the revolver's chambers." The compressed air expands rapidly at impact. It's like being hit with gale force winds. Answered Luffy, sounding uncharacteristically smart. It seems you are quite strong, Kuro said as he wiped a stream of blood that had begun to flow down his forehead before it got in his eye. You could say that, said Luffy, appearing in front of Kuro. I guess I will have to go all out, said Kuro as he leaned forward with his head down. Letting his arms hang, he started moving back and forth. Shouting Shikushi, he disappeared. A few seconds later, 5 gashes appeared on the cliffside further down the slope. Everyone, you should probably get back, said Luffy, as another 5 gashes appeared further up the cliffside. It seems the Kuro doesn't even know where that attack is going, it's completely random, said Fitz after he joined everyone a safe distance away, Nami retreating back to the Osprey with the invading pirates' loot. Zoro had climbed onto the enemy's ship to get a good view of the fight. I'm tired of this, said Luffy. Spinning on one foot with his right arm stretched out, his fingers held tightly together, he yelled Airblade. Just as 5 more gashes were appearing on another point of the cliffside, Luffy's airblade collided with the cat claws on Kuro's right hand and cut right through them. Kuro, surprised by the result of Luffy's attack, got back into position intending to perform a one-handed Shikushi. I told you I am tired of your useless attacks, Luffy said. Putting his hand out in front of him he shouted airlock. Kuro had just disappeared when Luffy's attack hit. What have you done to me? Asked Kuro in fear because he wasn't able to move any part of his body. I'm increasing the density of the air around you slowly to keep you in place. If I keep this attack going the air around you will freeze, but I don't think I want to wait for that. Luffy answered. Luffy clenched his right hand into a fist and started running at Kuro, yelling concentrated air blast. Swinging his arm in an uppercut motion, Luffy's fist connected with Kuro's stomach. Leaning over Luffy's fist, the wind around Kuro began to pick up when all of a sudden, Kuro was sent flying through the sky by a wind attack that was twice as powerful as the one that took out 50 men. Kuro's screams disappeared as he became a speck on the horizon. Looking around, Luffy noticed Django. Fitz, can you grab Django over there so that we can ask him why they were attacking this nice village, Luffy said. Fitz said Zoro and appeared right in front of Django. Putting him in a headlock he dragged him up the slope and threw him in front of Luffy. Would you mind telling me why you were attacking my sharpshooters village? Asked Luffy angrily. We were ordered to by Captain Kuro, answered Django, fearful of what might happen next. He was going to have me hypnotize Kaya, the girl he is working for, to make her write a will where she leaves everything to Kurahadal, continued Django. He was going to kill her and take everything she owns, he finished. Just as Django finished his sentence, Usopp noticed Kaya standing at the top of the slope. Hearing what Django said she fell to her knees. I would have never believed that Kurahadal could do something like that, she said with her face in her hands. He was the famous pirate of East Blue, Captain Kuro of the Thousand Plans, said Fitz as he walked up to Kaya. Kaya, these are the pirates I will be joining. If it weren't for them we would all be dead, said Usopp. How can I ever repay all of you? She asked. Do you need a ship? I happen to have one that I can give to you as a gift for saving me and this village. She added. Thank you, that would be great, but do you think that I can get some modifications done to it as well as Kuro's ship? Asked Luffy pointing to the ship with the cat for a figurehead. I would be delighted to pay for the modifications to both ships, answered Kaya happily. Flash forward. So the crew spent their time in the village, listening to Usopp's stories and telling their own. A marine ship came by the island to pick up any of the remaining pirates who had served under Captain Kuro, Luffy and everyone keeping out of sight so as not to attract any attention to them. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I really think we should find a name for ourselves as a crew, said Fitz as they all sat down in a restaurant, the Marines having left. That seems like a good idea, they'll need to call us something once we all get bounties on our heads, said Luffy grinning happily. Well then how about the Sky Pirates? Suggested Nami. That sounds great, answered Luffy jumping up and down, secretly hoping to himself that the Marines give him a cool personal nickname. Definitely sounds cool, said Usopp. Has a nice ring to it, added Zoro with a smile on his face as he finished another bottle of sake. Sky Pirates it is then, said Fitz with a broad grin. I'll ask Kaya if she can get all of the ships, including the Osprey, painted with the name we will be remembered as, said Usopp as he ran off looking for Kaya. So over the next couple weeks the Sky Pirates stayed in Usopp's town, waiting for their 2 new ships to be ready. Usopp, where are you? Said Kaya as she came through the restaurant door. Both ships are ready. Walking down the slope where the battle occurred, Usopp could see 2 brand new looking ships anchored in the shallows. The ship anchored on the left was called the Gerfalcon. The keel, hull, and guardrail were all painted a light cream color. The deck and the 2 main masts were left unpainted. The figurehead was that of a Gerfalcon, with a hooked light brown beak and keen black eyes. In keeping with the Gerfalcon theme of the ship, there were light brown streak-like spots on the hull, giving the appearance of folded wings. The other ship anchored in the shallows was called the Albatross. The keel was painted a white color, along with some of the hull. The figurehead was that of an albatross, with a long cream-colored beak with a yellow tip and sharp black eyes. The guardrails were painted black, as was most of the hull, giving the appearance of black wings folded over a white body. The deck and the two main masts were left unpainted. Aya told them that the Gyrfalcon would be extremely fast, and the Albatross would be able to sail long distances, only needing small gusts of wind. Luffy and the Sky Pirates all said their goodbyes and thanks to Kaya. Luffy had taken a liking to the Gyrfalcon and decided they would be using it to sail until Luffy decided otherwise. After moving all the supplies from the Osprey to the Gyrfalcon, they boarded the Gyrfalcon and prepared to set sail. The three birds of prey had all been painted with the Sky Pirates above each name and looked like this. The Sky Pirates. Gyrfalcon. The Sky Pirates. Osprey. The Sky Pirates. Albatross. Luffy, how are we supposed to sail 3 different ships with just 5 people? Asked Usopp. Just watch, answered Luffy with a confident grin on his face. Holding out his right hand, he yelled air control. Just as before everything started moving on its own. Usopp looked over at their newly acquired ships and saw that they were both being operated by some invisible force. That's really cool, said Usopp with awe on his face. As all 3 ship sails unfurled and the anchors on all ships had been raised, Luffy, using his power to control the air, sent all 3 ships in motion towards the open sea. I'm finally going off into the world to become a brave warrior of the sea, said Usopp, leaning on his elbows against the guardrail of the Gyrfalcon, watching as his village faded away and thinking of the adventures to come. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the Gold Mamba for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.